Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Voxa podcast.
Today, we are diving deep into a work that, it didn't just document the status of women, it really launched a revolution in human consciousness.
We're talking about Simone de Beauvoir's monumental 1949 text, The Second Sex.
A book that absolutely changed the conversation.
And when you look at the author, Simone Lucie Ernestine Marie Bertrand de Beauvoir, born in Paris in 1908, you see a figure who was just, steeped in intellectual life from the beginning.
Very much so.
She was a French writer, a philosopher, a political essayist, and her early novels, existentialist works like L'Invité or She Came to Stay and Leçons des Autres, they really solidified her reputation.
They put her on the map in that Parisian literary scene.
But the real measure of her intellectual rigor, I think, came years earlier. She ranked second in the incredibly demanding aggregation exam.
Right behind Jean-Paul Sartre.
Right behind her intellectual and life partner, Jean-Paul Sartre.
And that partnership, I think, it's the perfect place to start this deep dive, really. Their famed long-term bond, they called it a necessary bond.
Right.
It was built on this intense intellectual connection under what they called a lease or a bail.
Which is such a strange, almost legalistic term for a relationship.
It is, and it explicitly allowed for casual outside relationships. This arrangement wasn't just scandalous for the time. It was a kind of living, breathing, philosophical experiment in freedom and commitment.
And that's exactly what The Second Sex is fundamentally about, isn't it? That struggle for freedom against the immense weight of tradition.
Precisely.
It's so crucial for our listeners to understand that while this book became a foundational text for feminism, its roots are just so deep in philosophy. This is not just a survey of women's rights.
No, not at all. It's a systematic deconstruction of Western thought itself.
A philosophical treatise.
Exactly. And, recent scholarship has worked really hard to put Beauvoir the philosopher squarely back into the text. She didn't write this purely from observation. She was building on, synthesizing, and sometimes just completely inverting the core concepts of Hegel, Marx, Kant, Heidegger, Husserl.
All the heavy hitters.
The whole canon. She was absorbing all these diverse existentialist and structuralist ideas alongside her contemporaries, Sartre, of course, Merleau-Ponty, even Levi-Strauss. She was engaging with his work on kinship structures right before she published.
Wow.
So our mission today is really to unpack that synthesis in detail, point by point. The evidence she puts forward to explain why female subjugation is not just a social inconvenience.
It's a structural imposition.
The structural imposition enforced by civilization itself.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We have to start with the most famous line. The one that broke with, centuries of biological determinism.
The big one.
One is not born, but rather becomes woman. What is the philosophical weight of that statement? How does it introduce the core existentialist conflict?
It's the radical separation of sex from gender, decades before that terminology became common. Beauvoir is asserting that biology, the human female body, is, it's just a neutral starting point.
A biological fact.
A fact, nothing more. It is civilization, through its laws, its myths, its education, all its traditions, that elaborates this biological fact into the feminine identity.
So in existentialist terms, which is the framework she's using.
Right. Man, meaning humanity, is defined by his capacity for transcendence, to project himself into the future, to choose, to act upon the world. Woman, however, is relegated to immanence.
Immanence. So what does that mean exactly?
It means being stuck in the static, repetitive, given facts of her existence. Things like the biological functions of reproduction and the endless cycle of domestic maintenance.
So society basically takes the human female subject, stops her movement toward that transcendence, and then reduces her to these lazy, abstract cliches.
Yes, like the eternal feminine, using these myths to rationalize her subjugation.
That's a powerful idea.
And this is where she brings in Hegel's master-slave dialectic, though she alters it in a really subtle way.
How so?
Well, in Hegel, the master risks his life in a struggle for recognition, and that proves his freedom. The slave, choosing survival, remains bound to the material world, to work.
What?
Beauvoir argues that man, historically, risked his life through hunting, through war, through action, and in doing so, he established himself as the essential subject. The transcendent one.
The one who acts.
Exactly. Woman, however, was bound to the species, to life maintenance, to the repetition of life within the home. She never really had that opportunity to engage in the primordial risk necessary to establish her own absolute autonomy.
So she was defined not by her own actions,
but by her relationship to the subject. She's the absolute other.
That immediately links the problem of gender to, well, to political power structures. It shows this isn't just some cultural misunderstanding.
Oh, it connects directly to power. And she draws this really sharp comparison to other forms of oppression. Her time in Paris, observing anti-Semitism during the war, interacting with figures like Richard Wright.
That must have had a huge impact on her thinking.
It solidified her understanding that the Black, the Jew, and the woman are all objectified in the same structural way. They are reduced from complex, unique human beings to generic, negative stereotypes.
This concept of otherness,
Right, a concept of otherness that is both overtly cruel and subtly insidious. And it serves as the essential reason for their subjugation by the dominant group.
which leads to her incredibly powerful political conclusion. The problem of woman has always been a problem of men.
Because men are the ones who constructed the definitions of value, of what a subject is and what an other is.
And that structure persists, even when, enlightened thinkers try to just wave it away.
And this brings us to a key concept she tackles: nominalism.
Nominalism.
Right. Rationalists, the people who inherited Enlightenment, they'll argue that woman as such no longer exists, that everyone is just a human being. The word woman, they say, is just an arbitrary label.
But she argues that simply asserting that we're all just human beings and woman is just a word, that isn't enough, is it?
Not at all, because the label still carries real, tangible, negative consequences.
So to ignore it is.
It's what she calls an inauthentic flight. You can't just choose to ignore the social reality of your sex, to deny being categorized as woman when that category is situated within a disadvantaged reality is in itself a form of bad faith. It's a denial of your concrete situation.
She gives an example of this, right?
She does. A young woman denying her feminine frailty, but doing so specifically for the love of a militant man she wanted to be equal to.
So she's still seeking validation from the masculine subject.
She's still playing the game.
Yeah.
The truth is, whether a woman likes it or not, she can't just claim to be situated beyond her sex, because society has already defined her situation as one of profound disadvantage.
She has to work within that reality.
Within the reality of being the other before she can ever hope to transcend it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because Beauvoir then takes on the biological arguments.
The foundational pretext.
Exactly, the pretext for the myth of the other. And she doesn't deny biological difference, which is key. She denies the interpretation of that difference.
That is the essential maneuver she makes. She analyzes how these anatomical and reproductive differences are interpreted by the masculine culture to justify dominance. I mean, historically, philosophers from Aristotle onward formalized this active-passive dichotomy.
Man is active, woman is passive.
Man is the active principle, the rational soul. Woman is the passive receptacle, the raw matter. And this view, it just permeates the culture. It even shows up in the symbolic representation of coitus, where the male organ is seen as the animated tool, the initiator of action.
And the female is just the inert receptacle.
Inert receptacle.
And even if modern science later shows that, the ovum is active and the female body is incredibly dynamic, that cultural narrative, it remains stuck.
It's incredibly persistent. But the most significant biological difference, she argues, is the burden of reproduction in mammals.
Okay.
When the male sperm separates after conception, the man is immediately enclosed back in his own individuality. He's free to go pursue his transcendent projects.
But the female is trapped.
She is trapped. She carries the fetus for months, it's nourished by her own substance, and she becomes, in her words, both herself and other than herself. This long, continuous gestation, the labor, the nursing, it was a severe, life-altering handicap in the earliest fight against a hostile world.
So this unavoidable biological fact, this handicap of energy, of time, of vulnerability, is then seized upon and institutionalized as a right to male supremacy.
He converts fact into right. That's the move.
From the descriptive to the prescriptive.
Exactly. In early human societies, this reproductive capacity meant that women's absurd fertility, as she calls it.
Absurd fertility, wow.
The constant production of children. It created endless immediate needs. It restricted their mobility, their capacity for hunting or large-scale production. They needed male protection and hunting yields just to survive.
So man gained control.
He gained control over the balance between reproduction and material production. And since the creators of culture, the lawgivers, the priests, the early philosophers were all men, they naturally favored, rationalized, and institutionalized their own sexist supremacy.
And we see this institutionalization just hammered into our culture, right?
Yeah.
in religious legends like Eve and Pandora, in legal texts throughout history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, consider the severity of the historical legal disadvantages. Roman law, for example, declared women perpetual minors
Perpetual minors.
for their whole
Their
lives.
whole lives, they invoked the imbecility and fragility of the sex as the justification for subjecting them to lifelong guardianship by male relatives.
So they couldn't enter into contracts or inherit property freely, or even represent themselves in court. And this legal framework of powerlessness, it just persisted in various forms for centuries. Then, during the 19th century, with the rise of the bourgeois family model, anti-feminism actually intensified.
How so?
She cites Balzac's chillingly utilitarian definition of woman,
I remember this one.
a possession acquired by contract. She is personal property, and the possession of her is as good as a security. Indeed, properly speaking, woman is only man's annex.
Man's annex, that's horrifying.
It reduces women to economic dependence whose only value is in domestic maintenance and reproduction. It reinforces her role as housewife and mother, but strips her of all external responsibility and independence.
So this structural subjugation wasn't just metaphysical. It manifested as an actual economic caste system.
Absolutely. Men and women form two distinct economic castes, and this system is maintained through custom and tradition, even when, abstract rights might suggest otherwise.
And you still see echoes of this.
All the time. The most important jobs in industry, politics, finance, they are reserved overwhelmingly for men. They consistently secure better wages, greater chances for promotion. And this concrete power is constantly bolstered by the sheer prestige of tradition, the prestige of man as the hunter, the warrior, the lawmaker.
I wonder, though, she wrote this in 1949, right after women had entered the workforce in huge numbers during both world wars. Did work offer them a genuine path to liberation?
Not initially, and certainly not autonomously. When women started entering public industry in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were just shamefully exploited.
They were cheap labor.
Beauvoir notes the cynical reason employers preferred them. They do better work for less pay. They were seen as supplementary labor. Their wages just pin money.
So it was a slow, painful conquest for even basic dignity.
Incredibly slow. And even when they did achieve some professional success, the structural inequality, the wage gap, the lack of leadership roles, it all remained, confirming that the economic system, too, is designed from the ground up to preserve male sovereignty.
Given this enormous historical and economic framework, Beauvoir then moves to the individual psychology.
Right.
How does a girl internalize this societal relegation to otherness? She observes that initially, childhood is universal and gender neutral.
That's the starting point. Up to ages 3 or 4, the body is simply the radiation of a subjectivity. Both boys and girls explore their bodies, they seek the same warmth and love from the mother, and they exhibit very similar aptitudes.
They're both just pure transcendent consciousness trying to realize themselves in the world.
Exactly. They haven't learned their assigned roles yet.
But the first breaks in that wall of equality appear pretty early, and she identifies a surprisingly subtle source for it.
The difference in the urinary function.
Seems like such a small thing.
It's a remarkable piece of psychological observation that grounds this big philosophical idea of transcendence versus immanence right in the body.
Okay, break that down for us.
For the boy, urination is a free game. It's a feeling of omnipotence. He can manipulate his organ, he can aim the stream, he can act upon the world from a distance. He grasps his body as an instrument of domination, a means of external action.
And for the girl?
The girl, conversely, is subjected to a shameful and uncomfortable servitude. She has to squat, remove clothes, hide the function. And this difference, it helps condition the girl to view her body not as a means of action, but as a kind of burden, a passive object that requires shame and concealment.
So the boy is projected toward action, and the girl is projected toward inhibition and immanence.
That's the first split. The boy's pathway leaves him to posit himself as a subject through action and rivalry, but the girl's primary path shifts when the father enters the picture.
The father, who bridges the gap between the child and the external world.
The father is the crucial figure. He embodies the world of transcendence, the adventurous, immense, difficult, and marvelous world that exists outside the protected, repetitive domestic sphere.
The sphere of immanence, represented by the mother.
Right, so the boy can grow up to emulate the father, to join that adventurous world. The girl cannot. She can only passively expect his esteem, his recognition.
And this is where she challenges Freud, isn't it? She reframes the so-called Electra complex.
Absolutely. Beauvoir sees the girl's devotion to the father not as a simple sexual desire, but as this crucial internalized philosophical move.
Which is?
It's a deep abdication of the subject who consents to be object in submission and adoration. She's learning that defining herself is too difficult. It's so much easier to receive her worth externally from a powerful male figure. She gives up the struggle to define herself and instead seeks to be defined by him.
Wow. And this cultural prescription then sets the entire course for the girl's adolescence. She learns she must wait for love,
She is Sleeping Beauty.
right? The ultimate goal is to charm a masculine heart, which means she has to repress her natural spontaneity and ambition.
The whole training regime is designed around passivity. The games she plays, the literature she reads, the dreams she's encouraged to have, they all orient her toward accepting this role. If she's too assertive, too intelligent, or too strong in character.
She's told she frightens men away.
Exactly. To be truly feminine is to show oneself as fragile, futile, passive, and docile. Beauvoir summarizes the tragedy of this formation brilliantly.
What does she say?
For the boy, his vocation as a human being and as a male is cohesive. He is asked to be a fully realized subject. For the girl, there's a fundamental divorce between her properly human condition and her feminine vocation.
A divorce.
To be truly human means to transcend. To be truly feminine means to submit to immanence.
That deep internal conflict must inevitably lead to a crisis during adolescence, what she calls the awkward age.
It explodes in revolt. When the girl realizes that accepting the feminine vocation means resigning and mutilating herself, giving up her aspirations for the domestic sphere, she often rebels, but symbolically.
The sources have these vivid, almost disturbing examples of this resistance.
They do. Adopting food manias, like attempting to eat sealing wax or flies, as a kind of perverse, rebellious form of action.
And anorexia.
Most telling is the extreme manifestation of anorexia, which Beauvoir sees as a defiant, self-mutilating refusal. The girl tries to starve herself to prevent growing up, to avoid growing breasts, to stop resembling a woman.
It's a panicked rejection of the passive female object that society is trying to force her into becoming.
A total rejection. And then, the onset of menstruation marks the definitive biological end of any lingering hope of gender neutrality.
Which is often accompanied by deep psychological trauma.
It is the ultimate bodily betrayal, defined by a sense of horror, shame, and fear, largely because of the enduring cultural taboos around it. For many, it feels like a curse, a malediction, confirming their new status as other.
She tells that shocking anecdote of the young woman.
The one who, as a girl, secretly washed her stained underwear in a frozen brook to hide her secret from her family. At that moment, the girl could no longer dream of waking up changed into a man or thinking of herself as an asexual being. The brotherhood of matrons has won.
She is definitively and inescapably on the women's side without recourse.
And this entire psychological formation culminates in the institution of marriage, which Beauvoir analyzes not as a happily ever after.
But as a violent transition into captivity.
The wedding night, which often tries to condense the entire sexual initiation into a few compressed moments, frequently results in psychological shock. The girl, who has been living in the realm of the imaginary and the ideal, is suddenly hurled into the real world. Abstract consent becomes brutal physical fact.
And it's not just the physical trauma, is it? It's the psychic trauma.
That's the core of it, the discovery of the boredom and blandness of pure facticity.
Let's define that term, facticity.
It's the static, given, unchangeable facts of existence. The new bride, who perhaps idealized marriage as a form of liberation, suddenly realizes her life is finished forever. It's tied to one man, one home, and endless, endless repetition. She's no longer a being of projects and possibilities. She is a being of fact.
This transition often leaves the woman feeling intensely isolated, even if she married for love.
She quotes the profound distress of the young Countess Tolstoy. She adored her brilliant husband, but she quickly found herself just suffering.
What did she write in her diary?
She wrote of feeling unloved and cut off from her past, consumed by the feeling that nobody loves me in the icy reality of her domestic present. The ideal of love and transcendence just crashes against the wall of domestic routine and material maintenance.
That sense of being cut off is precisely why the next stage, the creation of the home, is so psychologically toxic, isn't it?
It is. The housewife, unable to transcend through action in the outside world, attempts to dominate her immediate environment instead.
She creates what Beauvoir calls a counter or exclusionary universe.
The home becomes a retreat, a self-contained world, a womb. The outside world is too vast, it's too male-defined, and it makes her feel dispossessed. So by eliminating what she does not possess, the outside world, she feels like a queen within the space she does control.
She enjoys the specific light under her own lampshade.
Because it illuminates only her abode. But this retreat has a devastating psychological toll. It forces all her energy inward.
And this is where we see the development of the housewife's neuroses, especially around cleanliness.
Housekeeping, she argues, is a perpetual destiny to have to repel an enemy without respite. The frantic pursuit of dust and dirt becomes a form of sadomasochism. What is dirt, after all?
It's the sign of life, of decay.
It's the rubbish left from any living growth, the sign of time passing and life decaying. By furiously attacking the dirt, she is attacking life itself, which revolts her because it reminds her of change, of transience, of the existence outside her control.
And this constant, repetitive, never-ending battle. It makes the woman lose her joie de vivre.
Completely. And that explains why the archetype of the suspicious, bitter wife develops.
She develops suspicion and bitterness toward all living beings that move, that create chaos, or disturb the perfection of her immanent world.
Wipe your feet. Don't mess up everything. Don't touch that.
She fears movement because movement creates work. She closes the windows because the sun eats away at the furniture.
So the neurosis of domesticity is rooted in this attempt to impose static order on a fundamentally chaotic, living world.
Forcing her static, repetitive life upon others.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
And while men confine her to this sphere of boring immanence, they simultaneously exalt her role as mother, often very hypocritically.
The hypocrisy is extreme.
It is. Beauvoir argues forcefully that maternal love is not a natural instinct. It's a conscious attitude, which is why there are bad mothers.
And she calls it a criminal paradox. A criminal paradox that society entrusts women, who are deemed incapable and emotionally unstable in other domains, too fragile to sign a contract or run a business, with the most important transcendent task there is, the formation of a human being.
And the result is often that frustrated mothers project their own complexes and resentments onto their children.
Their own sadomasochistic tendencies, leading to this intense psychological warfare that's disguised as love.
And in the era Beauvoir was writing, the pressure of fertility without reliable contraception was immense. It forced many women into desperate situations.
The statistics she collected were just shocking for 1949. She reported that between 800,000 and 1 million abortions were performed annually in France.
Which was nearly as many as live births.
Nearly as many. And 2/3 of the women were married. Since contraceptives were so scarce, abortion was a widespread phenomenon. And she notes the extreme moral hypocrisy of it all.
How so?
Men universally forbid abortion in public. They uphold the myth of the Blessed Mother, but they accept it individually and pragmatically as a convenient solution for their own lives.
And then they transfer the entire guilt onto the woman.
The physical and the moral guilt. The man speaks words in a pleading, threatening, reasonable, or furious tone. It is she who translates these phrases into pain and blood. The woman's body bears all the consequences of masculine moralizing, and she often begins to see her sex, her life, as a malediction.
This inherent injustice and oppression forces the wife to develop tools for survival that society then condemns.
Right. Things like being calculating, acting, lying.
Lying is born directly from necessity.
It is. Because she is assigned the role of a parasite, forced to use her sex to acquire benefits and human dignity, she has to become an actress. And man encourages this play acting because it feeds his vanity. He enjoys having the other cater to his definition of her.
But she uses this duplicity against him.
She uses the lie as a tool of revenge, asserting, "I am not his slave. He thinks he is clever, but he can be duped." Adultery often serves as this defense mechanism, an assertion of self-will and an escape from the boredom of facticity.
So this moral code of duplicity, it isn't a natural feminine trait.
No, it's the inevitable defensive response of the oppressed to a tyranny they inwardly hate, but outwardly accept for their own self-interest.
Okay, so if domesticity is a psychological trap, and the tools of the oppressed lying, calculating are inauthentic, how does a woman truly transcend?
Well, the obvious modern answer is work, right? Seeking self-justification outside the home.
But work is the necessary condition, not the sufficient one.
Exactly. Beauvoir analyzes the profound tension that persists even for the so-called independent woman. She is constantly split between her professional interests, her path to transcendence, and her sexual vocation.
Her societal role of being desired and admired.
And she has incredible difficulty balancing the two.
And this difficulty is often structural, not just personal, right? Her
Right.
family or her spouse rarely respects her career efforts in the way they would a man's. They impose duties and chores that distract her.
Precisely. This lack of full external validation, combined with her own lingering adolescent dreams and internalized dependence, it creates this tension, this nervousness, this frailty.
And she might try to deny her femininity altogether.
Right, adopting a severe virago attitude, dressing like a man, rejecting traditional female roles. But Beauvoir notes that she just wastes energy in defiance rather than constructive action. She remains preoccupied with her image and her difference, rather than her actual projects.
I'm really interested in this idea that professional success is often not enough to abolish that adolescent narcissism, the desire for what she calls glorious abdication to a hero.
This is a devastating insight into internalized oppression. Independence won through work can be used simply to enrich her image, making her a more attractive other rather than a true subject.
So she still reveres man as the ideal.
And if she meets a man she deems truly superior, she is often ready to fall on her knees and just give up the struggle. She believes in the possibility of a given salvation, that her worth will be consecrated by his gaze, rather than continuing the difficult, continuous effort of self-justification.
It's easier to be justified by an external figure.
Then to achieve that hard-won autonomy for yourself.
But she does find a few exceptions to this dilemma. Women who could achieve self-realization without this split. She focuses on certain performing artists.
Yes, actresses, dancers, and singers. For at least 3 centuries, they held a concrete independence that other women lacked. And the question is why?
And the reason is?
Because their professional success reinforced their sexual worth. Their job required them to utilize and showcase their beauty, their grace, their charm. They weren't torn between contradictory aspirations because clothes, beauty, and charm were part of their professional duties.
So they could realize themselves as human beings through their art and accomplish themselves as women simultaneously.
They managed to escape the contradiction that plagued the average female professional.
So the ultimate goal then, based on her existentialist framework, must be a relationship based on peerhood. What does she offer as the final conclusion on how to achieve genuine reciprocity?
It has to start with mutual, lucid recognition. The conflict will persist as long as men and women do not recognize each other as peers, because each sex is victim both of the other and of itself.
The vicious circle is complex.
It is. The woman is complicit in her own oppression by pursuing the dream of resignation and security, and the man is complicit by pursuing his dream of annexation and dominance. Both are acting in bad faith.
She calls for reframing the entire erotic drama. The woman is only passive in sex because the system affirms masculine sovereignty.
And when women claim their dignity, notions of victory and defeat in the erotic drama must yield to an idea of exchange and shared joy.
It's a fundamental shift in perspective.
And she reminds us that the fact of being a human being is infinitely more important than sexual singularities. Both sexes are equally consumed by the ambiguity of existence, flesh and spirit, finitude and transcendence. They are eaten away by time and stalked by death.
They have the same essential need of the other.
But that need must be met in freedom, not through submission.
The relationship must then combine 2 autonomous existences. It can't be a withdrawal from the world or an annexation of one person by another.
Exactly. The individual as individual must be integrated into society and thrive without assistance. Only then can links be created based on pure generosity and the recognition of 2 freedoms. When 2 people meet as autonomous peers, having assumed their own condition with lucid modesty, they can finally escape that vicious circle of mutual resentment, inauthenticity, and bad faith that Beauvoir analyzed so relentlessly.
This deep dive into Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex really demonstrates why it remains one of the most intellectually rigorous and, frankly, explosive works of the 20th century.
It just forces you to confront the deepest structural biases in our civilization.
So let's summarize the central statements for you as key takeaway points.
Okay.
Takeaway 1, the foundational idea. Woman is not defined by biology, but by civilization, which uses centuries of masculine myth to perpetually cast her as the inessential other. This process arrests her human potential for transcendence and forces her into the static realm of immanence.
Takeaway 2, the price of inauthenticity. The subjugated role of wife and mother, defined by domesticity and dependence, is not happiness. It's a state built on fear and submission, and it breeds resentment, duplicity, and neurosis. trapping women in a cycle of repetition, boredom, and profound psychological distress against which they must constantly fight.
Takeaway 3, the path to peerhood.
Yeah.
True liberation and the end of gender conflict require both sexes to achieve authentic individual freedom through autonomous action and mutual recognition. This means transforming relationship dynamics from submission and domination into an equilibrium based on peerhood, where our shared humanity is infinitely more important than sexual singularities.
And the core lesson of freedom that Simone de Beauvoir offers us, rooted so deeply in existentialist thought, is this measure of authentic autonomy. Marriage, or any intimate partnership, must combine two autonomous existences. It can't be a withdrawal or an annexation.
So here's the final thought for you.
If your primary relationship suddenly vanished, would you feel you were left with nothing? Or would you still be firmly rooted in your own self-defined world of projects and purpose? The answer to that question is the measure of your authentic freedom.